Hey there, cats and kitties. I am the Blues Man, Johnny Blues. With this video, I'll be discussing my thoughts on Series 10, Episode 12 of Doctor Who, The Doctor Falls. For all intents and purposes, the Series 10 finale episode, and I'm going to cut right to my notes from straight out of the gate to keep everything as condensed as I can about what I was thinking and feeling, and reminded of watching this particular finale episode. The first thing I have written down is the melancholic air that was permeating the entirety of this episode, this finale. It was somewhat disconcerting, I mean, from right out of the gate, you're witnessing the Master and Missy having teamed up, having captured, for all intents and purposes, the Doctor knocked him out and captured him, and they're teasing and taunting him viciously so, with the cyber conversion that Bill experienced, talking about, all the different ways they're going back and forth trying to figure out how to kill him and go through all the rest of his regenerations and everything like that. And so that when the Doctor has this first initial smaller victory in that we find through the flashbacks, Missy had clocked him with her umbrella and he went and tapped the computer keys and everything and redirected all the Cybermen to be pointedly toward, Time Lords now with two hearts rather than just the one, just human beings. It felt like a false victory because, you already knew, you were already sensing that things are amiss and that this was going to spell disaster in the long term, which is exactly what it did. This is what sicked the Cybermen on them when they went up to this upper floor or lower floor, whatever it was, this farmland sort of scenario. And so it didn't feel like a whopper of a victory. I didn't feel like fist pumping, thrilled that the Doctor had air quotes beaten them in that moment. And that really just speaks to the overall sad and depressed feelings I was having watching the entire affair. It was like all of the failures of The Empire Strikes Back, but and then some. Like just racking up on top of each other, and I didn't feel like a victory was actually something that was coming. And even the victories, the smaller victories that did, finally finish out the story, you're still rocked by the Doctor's own refusal to regenerate the entirety of the episode. You see early on that he is already on his way, so to speak. I think the linchpin moment there was when he was zapped by one of the Cybermen before they left the rooftop, the cityscape, and went to this farmland area. Speaking of which, with the farmland area, it very much heavily reminded me of the Series 3 two-parter Human Nature and the Family of Blood, because you had these sort of pre-conversion Cybermen very much walking around kind of like the scarecrows in that two-parter, and all of the farmhands and these families and whatever like that, the men and women alongside the children were taking up arms, taking up shotguns and shooting them down and turning them into scarecrows. And all the cinematography, I mean, there was such sweeping cinematography once again. The direction was on point, much as it was in the previous episode, but it just had this melancholic air, and it was depressing. For me personally, I can only communicate what I was experiencing, but it was by and large depressing. There were no really super-duper affirming moments in the episode, which is somewhat ironic, and I'll touch back upon that toward the end of the video. As I have mentioned here, I loved sort of the few past references we got, like the jelly babies. The Doctor offers the one girl jelly babies, and I just made a post on Facebook like yesterday. I had gotten a bag of Swedish fish, and I said, in lieu of having jelly babies, I like to pretend these are jelly babies. And then, lo and behold, we actually have a jelly babies reference in the latest episode of Doctor Who. I thought that was a nice little coincidence. But then also all of the sort of past encounters the Doctor's had with the Cybermen all get name-checked twice in the episode. The most standout to me was Telos, referring back to Tomb of the Cybermen, one of my favorite all-time Doctor Who stories, all told, let alone Cyberman stories. Which also brings me back to, I was really excited about the fact, as you could tell from my previous episode discussion video, all the multi-generational Cybermen, all that aesthetic because of the timey-wiminess of the black hole and the length of the ship that they're on and everything, this colony vessel. But I feel like a few generations of Cybermen were missing. Sort of the Earthshock, Silver Nemesis, which I haven't actually seen Silver Nemesis, but I've seen clips of it. But that era of Cybermen was noticeably missing, and that's kind of a shame. I wish we would have seen at least a couple of those Cybermen. I thought it was really clever that Nardole, you see him sort of tucking tail and running at the start of the episode when Missy and the Master have gotten the better of the Doctor, but we find he's being useful, air quotes, getting a shuttlecraft and taking the verbal abuse that both Missy and the Master are doling out to him while he's waiting for Bill and the Doctor. Bill is back, he announces, but I thought it was really clever how he, sort of configures the computers so that the average weaponry is suddenly like nuclear. The shotguns are blowing things up, and the Doctor has the little girl use an apple at one point. No, never use a gun, use an apple. Now there was an affirming message for me. Somebody who's very much against gun ownership and very much in support, not to get all political on you, but of regulations and things like that. I just thought that was a great commentary that even an average apple could become a weapon to fight these monstrosities that just want to conform everyone into their soul similar being, that kind of thing. And I liked seeing that Nardole was very much capable along those lines. I thought it was really kind of interesting that he's got a love interest blooming with the guest actress whose name escapes me. I think her character's name was Hazrin. Correct me if I'm wrong. But she's kind of digging on him, and the Doctor convinces Nardole, well, you kind of got to stay behind. There's only one of us who's the stronger. He's playing on Nardole's sort of, self-importance, I guess, with that line. Maybe even tipping the hat to the fact, well, I'm not long for the wind, Nardole. Pick up for my slack, please. I need your help. And that was kind of poignant. I really liked seeing Nardole staying behind and helping all these children and these, families and everything like that, ushering them down into another level or up into another level, whichever direction they said they were going. I thought the entire aspect of Bill's mental projection was absolutely clever, because at first I was like, damn it, they brought her back. Somehow the Doctor brought her back. But it's entirely like the Quantum Leap effect. If you've ever seen the series Quantum Leap, it's one of my all-time favorite sci-fi time travel series. Sam Beckett would leap, all throughout his own timeline, but into the lives of others. And so everyone looking at whomever he was existing within would see the original person, but his mental projection would always see his original form, even though every mirror image he was greeted with was the look of the person he was inhabiting. And that's very much the case with Bill. She is externally a Cyberman. She's a Mondasian Cyberman, but her humanity has not been entirely scraped away. It's not been entirely eschewed, and she's holding on to that. She's created a barrier around that aspect of her humanity so she can still exist, and we still get Pearl Mackey's performance, just absolutely gorgeously, which I thought was really, really clever. A really clever way, because there are those scenes where she's Pearl Mackey, she's Bill, but people are so terrified of her and reacting to her, and if she gets her anger up, she blows out the barn door and everything. So I really loved that. Again, talking about the affirming nature of Doctor Who, of moments in this episode, and where we leave Bill. More on that to come. Elsewhere in my notes, I talked about the palpable tension of Missy's dilemma. We finally have the other leg drop. Missy has fully, truly changed for the better, making it that much more utmost tragic that she reveals this to the Master by stabbing him in the back and deciding to go back and help the Doctor. We have what is, for all intents and purposes, I wrote it down, a murder-suicide between the Master and Missy. She kills her former incarnation with enough time to spare to get back to his TARDIS, but then he blasts her with that laser probe or whatever it is, and he's like, don't even bother regenerating. You took the full length of the blast, whatever that means. And Missy kind of just lies there dying, ... dead, speculatively, I don't know. But it's like a murder-suicide because the Master killed himself in a different incarnation twice, you know. I guess it wasn't arguably suicide, it was more murder, but still, to kill himself, themselves, whatever, the pronoun game, that was somewhat gobsmacking. I did not expect that. I thought Missy was going to have turned evil and been responsible for the Doctor's, you know, penultimate regeneration by some means. I did not expect them to turn on each other, just showing you how evil and twisted and sick the Master is. And I did think it was interesting, I also jotted down, the Doctor says something to the Master early on in the episode about having somehow escaped Gallifrey, and oh, they fixed your little problem, or something like that. Referencing, I believe, the drums. The Time Lords, Rassilon, had put the drums into the Master's head, and I guess the implication there is they'd taken it out again. A lot of timey-wiminess going on there, timey-wimey confusion. But I guess they took it out again, and so he doesn't have that problem anymore. I just thought I'd put that out there because I see a lot of people still referencing the Master as having the drums in his head. Did he always have the drums in his head, going back to the original classic series incarnations and everything? No, they didn't. They didn't all have that. Some of the speculation was when that was introduced to the story, maybe they did. But no, apparently it was something that was put in there later and then taken out again. So, okay, it didn't seem to do a hell of a lot to change the demeanor of the Master, as we can see by the end of this story. I have on in my notes, the Doctor goes out in an epic blaze of glory, dies for all intents and purposes because of his reluctance, his refusal to regenerate. Talking about suicide, talking about being suicidal almost. He's brought to the bitter end, the edges of his sanity with everything he's experienced. Especially losing a companion in this such a way that he does Bill. On the face of it, it's the most horrific thing the Doctor's ever had to face, I think. At least in the modern era, arguably so in the entirety of the history of Doctor Who. To have to bear witness to that and hold the blame that he does for that, even though it wasn't his fault by extension. I mean, it's more so to do with the Master and Missy. More so the Master, because as I say, Missy actually had converted to good. She had dedicated herself in those final moments to standing alongside the Doctor. You could argue that, you know, it's because she became a Time Lady. There was something maternal there that spoke to being more empathetic and compassionate. I don't know. But it just... The Doctor will not regenerate. He does not want to go on like this anymore. And this is the most emotional we've ever seen any incarnation of the Doctor. Even the 10th Doctor didn't want to regenerate by the end, but it was much, much more weighty and impactful herein. And that it adds to that melancholy. It adds to that being sad and depressed watching this. I don't want Peter Capaldi to go. He doesn't want to go. As the character, he doesn't want to go. Maybe as the actor, he didn't want to go either. I don't know. It's arguable. But it killed me to watch this. And then, of course, by the end of the episode, I have in my notes, we arrive, presumably, at the South Pole on Earth, hearkening back to the 10th planet, answering to my speculation expertly. I called that one, but I think a lot of people did. Can't take the credit fully for that. And we are introduced to David Bradley as the first Doctor. Now I'm giddy. Now I'm jumping off the walls. I'm you know, absolutely just dying with excitement over that. In the moment I was watching it, and I was still on the verge of tears. I was still so depressed and sad. And it was like I couldn't even feel the affirmation of that moment, the excitement of that moment. Now I can. Calling back on it hours later after having watched it, I certainly can. And I thought it was interesting, if you listen to the dialogue, the banter of the first Doctor, he very much doesn't want to change either. He thinks it's nonsense. He thinks it's ridiculous. And as we all know, At the end of the 10th planet, the first Doctor does experience, it wasn't known as regeneration at the time, his renewal with the assistance of the TARDIS, which he had desperately to get back to. And I think Ben and Polly were there to experience that and see the second Doctor's incarnation. You know, Patrick Troughton's face suddenly jump up from the mast laying prone on the floor of the TARDIS console room. So I thought that was interesting. Going into the Christmas episode, we will see the 12th Doctor and the first Doctor together, paired up together, neither one of them wanting to renew or rejuvenate. And I think that will speak volumes to the tipping of the hat as to what the story plotline might be there. They're going to guide each other and help each other realize they both need to survive. There's something bigger and grander and bolder yet to come for each of them. And that excites the hell out of me, you know. So I already put it off twice in the video. I talked about the affirming nature of Doctor Who, of moments in this episode that were few and far between, at least for me. All surrounding Bill, her cyber conversion, and the arguable cop-out that came later with her being puddled, effectively. Going back to the pilot, the first episode of Series 10. Now, I said I'd want to wring Stephen Moffat's neck if he did this. Part of me still does, but I backpedaled a little bit on that as well, because I watched the Doctor Who fan show after watching the episode, which bonus points to my buddy Elijah for getting showcased at the tail end of that for his Cyberman costume that he made homemade at home. Where else would you make something homemade? But in any case, they talked to Stephen Moffat, and he was addressing why he gave Bill this happy ending with the Puddle Girl from the pilot episode, having tracked her down through the teardrops and everything because of the transference there and everything. And he mentioned Doctor Who is unlike most modern shows out there because it can be affirming. It can give you a happily ever after. It doesn't have to struggle to do so. It's not like most of these more down note themes and things that shows carry and such like that. And I have to kind of give him props after hearing his words, his thoughts on the subject. Even if I don't entirely agree, he's the showrunner and he kept strong to his convictions about that. And he's not entirely wrong. Doctor Who, I mean, the Doctor, why do we love the Doctor so much? It's because he saves the day. He does it time and again. He's done it since 1963, time and time and time again. And that's arguably what happened here. He wasn't really responsible for this saving grace for Bill, but that's kind of the nature of the show. And the reason I'm more accepting of this than I was what happened with Clara at the end of Series 9, this did not feel like a last-minute gimmick. I have it written right here. It was not a last-minute gimmick. This is something that was in the plot line going all the way back to the first episode of Series 10. It was in the pipeline. It was already, you know, the seed was already dug into the dirt that early on. This is something that was a long time coming. It's not something they just pulled out of their asses at the last minute, at the nth degree, to give Bill this wonderful happily ever after send-off. This was in the works from the beginning. It was clever for that, because it speaks to exactly what the nature of that Puddle Girl character was after she had been converted into this, you know, wet being, for lack of a better term. I don't remember what the species was called, if we even got a name drop of one. And she's able to sort of transmogrify Bill into a similar being as herself. Now, what's interesting, as I have written here, the teardrop that reawakens the, you know, the Doctor's regeneration links Bill to the Doctor in a similar fashion by the end, you know, as this Puddle Girl was then linked to Bill. So if she crops up come Christmas time, it's already in the works, much as was Bill's saving grace, her happily ever after, was in the works from the word go. So is her return if she does return. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. I think she will. And I just think it's interesting. I can see both sides of the argument. Moffat does this time and time again. He doesn't seem to find it meaningful when characters are lost to the battle at large. And it would have been a hell of an impact if Bill had remained converted. But I think it still remains impactful because the Doctor didn't save her. In a sense, she saved the Doctor. And not in a super powerful, Mary Sue Clara sort of way, where she wiped his memory to give him a new lease on life and everything like that by the end of Series 9. The Doctor was carried back to his TARDIS, and that regeneration was prompted by Bill's emotions and the weightiness of that. It was impactful to me. The bond that was there between them, they'd only known each other for so small a time, yet they were so important to each other that the Doctor would have gone to any level to try to save her. Where there's tears, there's hope. And it was embodied and solidified by the end of this episode. So I take back my wanting to strangle Moffat. It does upset me a little bit, but I can see where he's coming from. And even though it's unrealistic, it's Doctor Who. It's Doctor Who. It's a fantasy sci-fi show at the end of the day. And as finales go, this was spectacular, but heavily, heavily emotional, saddening. And I can only but wait till Christmas and hope that all of my hopes and dreams will be ever lifted and affirmed again. Because this was so bittersweet, knowing that this is one of the final times we'll ever get to see the 12th Doctor, Peter Capaldi, who was a tour de force in this episode. That entire speech, he's trying to convert Missy and the Master over to his cause, and the Master just eschews him. This is the face of someone who wasn't even listening. Rocked me to my core. Very much akin to the speech he gave in the Zygon two-parter of Series 9 about war. How despicable the nature of war is. And I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments below what you thought of The Doctor Falls. Love it or hate it, anything goes in the comments below. Just love having that conversation. Otherwise, that'll be pretty much it for me on this. Hope this video finds you well. See you at Christmas time. Catch you all later. Peace.